Theory has it that the Grand Canyon was formed 3 to 4 million years ago, where the Asian tectonic plate meets up with the Pacific tectonic plate. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but they believe that the river used to run the opposite from the coast inland. Now the river runs from inland to the coast. And they're saying that the Asian plate lifted up the Pacific plate, which reversed the course of the water, helping to create the Grand Canyon. I have a separate theory. I talked to an engineer about this when I was on a rafting trip, and I said, look, we had this huge meteor that impacted down on the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. At the time that that impact occurred, it distorted the tectonic plate. It also displaced millions and millions of gallons of water. My theory is that that displaced water was pushed up into North America and on the Pacific plate, and it created the Grand Canyon much quicker than I think than people believe is possible. That's my theory, and I'm going to stick with that. The modern day Grand Canyon, fellow Toastmasters, the modern day Grand Canyon was discovered by a conquistador, Francisco Coronado, in 1540. To this day, it was put into a national park in 1908 by Theodore Roosevelt. There are some basic, simple hikes you can take in the Grand Canyon. The easiest one being the rim walk. You drive to the south rim and you just walk along the rim. You still get the spectacular beauty of the Grand Canyon. The only thing you have to really deal with here is the crowds. Lots and lots of people. But there are areas on the rim where you can hike and get away from all the people. An average hike would be like the hike down to Indian Gardens, a day hike, or to Horseshoe Mesa. These are simple, simple hikes to do. A tougher hike would be to hike down to Tanner Trail, 17.5 miles down the south rim. This is where you lose toenails, but because you have to backpack down here. 17.5 miles, you go through lava, you go through all kinds of debris and bushes, but by the time you get down there, you are wiped out. The toughest hike that I ever did in the Grand Canyon was to leave from the north rim and head to the first place, Thunder River. You hike down for an entire day, probably 10 miles. You come to a place where there is water shooting out of the rock face. And if you stop and stay there, it looks like you are in Hawaii. Has anybody ever been to this place in the bottom of the Grand Canyon? To Pete's or Thunder River from the north rim?
Different one.
Okay. That place was amazing. From there, we hiked the next day to Deer Creek. Now, I get to Deer Creek, and I am wiped out. This is day 2 of a 10-day hike. By the time we get to Deer Creek, I'm totally wiped out. We camp overnight, and then we head to Thunder Falls. We get down to Thunder Falls, and we finally set up camp spot there. And we start hiking down to the river to see the river from there. And you end up on narrow passages where you're actually hugging the cliff wall with your backpack, because if you turn this way, you're going to get knocked over. But we hiked and made it to our camp spot. Later that night, when I'm laying in bed, you start to think about those moments in your head. You're doing it while you're doing it, but you start thinking, man, if I would have fell, it would have been crazy. So being super wiped out, finally getting down to the edge, seeing the river rafters at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, beautiful, beautiful spot. But I was wiped out. Eating smock ramen, that's all I could afford to take down with me at the time. And I have to tell you, that smock ramen is so good when you're that hungry. But what was better than that was one of the river rafters on their day hike hiked up the trail that I went and stuck my feet over the edge. A whole group come wandering by. He goes, man, you look thirsty. I go, oh, I'm doing okay. He pulls out 2 warm, sandy Budweiser beers and hands them to me. He says, here, enjoy these. Wow, I would never hike down the Grand Canyon with beers, just too much weight to take down for that long. But I did accept his Budweiser beers with the sand on, and they were awesome with my smock ramen dinner. But that night, sitting there eating dinner, Get done, and I lift up my leg, and there are 6 scorpions just sitting under my leg because of the heat. I was this close to getting stung by a scorpion had I moved and jumped and freaked out. But I did not. I gradually got up and went to my little tent, zipped myself in it, and made sure I stayed inside. Hiking out took 5 days to hike out. It was brutal. That is the most difficult hike I've ever taken in the Grand Canyon. But again, when you finally get out, the sense of accomplishment is amazing. To close, I would like to say something. We're about to lose the EPA, and they are actually stating that they might start mining again in the Grand Canyon for iridium. Now, there are mines down there that do warn you about radioactive springs and water areas. And if they start mining again in the Grand Canyon, we're going to lose something extremely special to all of us, to all of our kids, our grandkids, and future generations. We as human beings on this planet are occupying more and more space, and there's just less and less area that we can go to relieve ourselves from the daily minutia of life. So what I would like to say is, if you have an opportunity to vote against it, or be against it, or voice your opinion about that, please do so, because I don't want to see the Grand Canyon be mined again. Thank you, Mrs.